Okay, so I want to talk about the EEOC, who, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, who in my opinion is just good for nothing. Um as I said in my last video I posted, I called to the EEOC in February and my appointment was scheduled for June. Um like 4 months later. My interview was going to be over the phone. So I just happened to check my email the night before my interview, something I didn't do often, and received an email that my appointment was canceled because I failed to confirm the appointment. The woman I scheduled the appointment with never mentioned I was going to receive a confirmation email. Because if she had, I would have checked my email more often or every day. The conversation with her was recorded. So I went to listen to it because I thought maybe she mentioned it and I didn't remember her saying it. But sure enough, when I listened to the recording, she never mentioned I would receive an email confirming the appointment. The only thing she said and stressed to me was to be sure to be available and what number they would be calling from. She couldn't tell me the full number, but she gave me the first six, which would be the same. And then she said the last four would be different. That was it. So I responded to her regarding the cancellation. And, I told her that, you know, if I had been told um, that I needed to confirm, I would have checked my email. I had like over 900 emails in my box, and half of them were not even open. So I just was so pissed. And then, dealing with the stress of driving for DoorDash, because at the time I was still driving for DoorDash, which was a big part of the reason why I reached out to the EEOC in regards of the job loss from IKEA. So eventually I did get an interview. So when I spoke with the EEOC investigator, she explained, the basis of the appointment was to gather information about my claim to assess if they had jurisdiction under federal laws to pursue my claim further into mediation or an investigation. So she asked me some questions, and I told her a lot of what went on during my employment with IKEA, which basically I think went one ear out the other. So, I was telling her, like, one incident that was going on, that Plockers were getting as much as 300 lines. And the reason why that was happening, they were giving Plockers a line for every pick from a location. So if a Plocker had to pick 10 pieces from a location, that would count as 10 lines. Where when I would pick, for example, I had to pick 112 pieces from one location, and it took me almost 30 minutes or more. That pick counted as one line. So I was telling her about some other issues that were going on, like I wasn't able to transfer to a B pallet, which was an issue that slowed me down. And I just, was telling her about all that, I could remember from, all that happened at the job. And so the investigator says, that in order for them to assist, they needed to show that it was specifically occurring due to disability, race, sex, religion, and specific comments and conduct, where the employer would have been able to come back in my situation and show that they spoke with me on numerous occasions about my numbers and how they are actually going to be able to show that there is a possibility that this is how it came to my termination. Then she says she's not agreeing that it's fair, but just trying to explain how the EEOC looks at things of how to get to that strength. Then she goes on to say they don't agree with my termination or what they terminated me for. And they are not saying they're in compliance with some other employment laws. It's just there's not a federal discrimination statute where they are going to be able to make that connection to say they actually violated the federal discrimination laws. Now, let me translate what she said. In other words, What she's saying is, we know what they did to you was wrong, but we don't care. And we're not going to investigate since we know it was set up for you to fail. We really don't care that you were out of a job with no income and you lost your place and maybe stand to lose more. That's not our problem. As long as I have my job to sit here and tell you and many others that we are not going to help you because it's out of our jurisdiction. To allow employers to do as they please. So after she pretty much explained that, they were not going to help me or they could not help me, I said, to her, pretty much an employer can put an employee out of a job and that's okay. Because I knew for a fact that they set it up so I could not reach the goal. And, around the time of the interview with the EEOC investigator, I had just received an eviction notice on my door. And so I let it be known to her, not that she cared, that I, recently received an eviction notice and how it's just wrong that the EEOC will not help because it's not their jurisdiction, which translates to, we don't want to help you. Then she also says that they, like the EEOC, does not enforce all employment laws, but there is such thing as wrongful termination. That doesn't have to do with the EEOC, where it would be more, I was treated wrong and I was wrongfully terminated, but it would be something that a judge would have to review the case to determine it in court. So, then she's like, well, she's not an attorney, so she can't offer legal advice, but that would be the next basis of the next option for me to be able to pursue my case further, to see if a judge can show they violated a different employment law that the EEOC was unable to force. Well, guess what? A judge looked at my case and granted the motion to dismiss. And I don't believe that there is no way an honorable judge could look at my evidence and conclude that my former employer did nothing wrong. Did nothing wrong. So, the EEOC would definitely be a Donald Trump necessary cut. Why does it take 4 months to get an interview? It must be a lot of workers with complaints of their employer. But that's just it. Your employer, can harass you and manage you out of your job for any personal reason, and that's okay according to the judge. And the only thing the EEOC will do is give you a 90-day right to sue notice, knowing the chances of you getting a lawyer is slim to none. So, around the time when I was filing the suit, I had registered with the Baltimore Lawyer Referral Service. And the lawyers they referred, I never received a call back. And the one I did receive a call back from called almost 2 weeks later. And when I returned her call, she shut me down with Maryland being an at-will state without hearing any details of what happened. Because if she had, she would have come to determine I was wrongfully terminated. Hopefully, these people behind the scenes never find themselves on the other side of the tracks with the loss of income and stripped of their livelihood. We just never place ourselves in someone else's shoes. And it's so sad.